8 million people paid to see this. Look at it. 3 massive paintings, the end of the world, heaven on the left, hell on the right, and in the center, the Last Judgment. God on a throne, angels blowing trumpets, humanity divided into the saved and the damned. Between 1854 and 1879, these 3 paintings toured Britain, America, and Australia. 8 million people paid admission to see them. They were displayed in exhibition halls with theatrical lighting and explanatory pamphlets. They were the Victorian equivalent of a blockbuster movie. And then, nothing. Forgotten. Rolled up and stored in a warehouse. Sold at auction in 1935 for £7. One of them was cut into 4 strips to make a decorative screen. These are the Last Judgment paintings by John Martin, created between 1851 and 1853. Each canvas is over 6 feet tall and up to 10 feet wide. They depict the biblical apocalypse, the end of the world described in the Book of Revelation. Today, all 3 hang in the Tate Britain in London. They're considered masterpieces. But for nearly a century, they were treated as worthless Victorian kitsch. And here's the devastating part. John Martin died 1 week after these paintings were first exhibited to the public. He never knew they would become the most seen paintings of the Victorian era, and he never knew they'd be forgotten. By the end of this video, you'll know why 8 million people paid to see paintings of the apocalypse. How these works went from Victorian blockbuster to worthless junk to museum masterpiece. Why one of them has a railway train going to hell. And what this says about how we decide what art matters. But first, who was John Martin? The Last Judgment triptych, 3 oil paintings by British artist John Martin, were created between 1851 and 1853. The Plains of Heaven, which measures 78.3 inches by 120.7 inches, The Last Judgment, which is 77.5 inches by 128.2 inches, and The Great Day of His Wrath, which measures 77.4 inches by 119.4 inches. Now they all are in the Tate Britain, London. John Martin was born in 1789 in Northumberland, England. By the 1820s, he'd become famous for painting enormous dramatic scenes from the Bible and ancient history. His style was apocalyptic landscapes, tiny human figures dwarfed by collapsing cities, floods, volcanic eruptions, and divine wrath. Think disaster movie, but painted. Critics hated his work. They called it theatrical, melodramatic, and too popular with the masses. But the public loved it. Martin's paintings drew huge crowds. People paid to see them exhibited. He sold prints, mezzotint engravings that middle-class Victorians bought to hang in their homes. His paintings were expository, educational, moral instruction disguised as spectacle. You'd look at the apocalypse and think, I should probably live a better life. In June 1851, Martin signed a contract with a publisher named Thomas McLean. Here's how it worked. Martin would paint The Great Day of His Wrath. McLean would have it engraved, turned into a mezzotint print that could be mass-produced and sold. But first, they'd exhibit the painting to the public, charge admission, build hype, and get people to subscribe to buy the print when it was ready. The profits from the print? McLean got 2/3, and Martin got 1/3. By the end of 1851, Martin had sent the painting to the engraver, Charles Mottram. And then Martin had another idea. What if it's not just one painting? What if it's 3? In June 1852, he signed a second contract. Same deal, 2 more paintings, a triptych. The left panel, The Plains of Heaven. Paradise, the saved enjoying eternal bliss. The center panel, The Last Judgment, humanity divided. And the right panel, The Great Day of His Wrath, Earth being destroyed. So, what did he paint? Start with the right panel, The Great Day of His Wrath. This is the moment described in the Book of Revelation when the 6th seal is broken. And lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood. And the heaven departed as a scroll when it is rolled together, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places. Look at the painting. The earth is literally splitting apart, mountains collapsing, cities tumbling into a bottomless abyss. The sky is blood red, tiny human figures falling and screaming helpless. This is the apocalypse, the end of everything, nature's overwhelming power, the wrath of God. The scale is massive. The canvas is over 6 feet tall. The figures in the foreground are life-size. You're not looking at this painting, you're inside of it. This painting was finished first, sent to the engraver by the end of 1851. And it's the one that Tate bought in 1945, the first piece of the triptych to be recognized as important. The center panel, The Last Judgment. This was always the central piece, hung between the peaceful plains of heaven on the left and the violent great day of his wrath on the right. In the background, the celestial city, New Jerusalem. The light of God pervades everything. At the top, Christ sitting in judgment on the throne of God. 24 elders seated around him. 4 angels sounding trumpets after the opening of the 7th seal. Below, a yawning chasm divides humanity. On the left, God's right hand, the saved. Men, women, children gathered on Mount Zion. And not just any people. Martin painted about 40 famous historical figures among the saved. An engraved key was published in 1855 identifying them. Shakespeare, Isaac Newton, George Washington, Thomas More, Chaucer, Wesley, scientists, writers, artists. On the right were the damned. Richly dressed women. Salome, the whore of Babylon. Lawyers, clergymen, a bishop, and a pope. And here's the detail that makes this painting unforgettable. A railway train. Carriages labeled London and Paris tumbling into the bottomless pit. In 1853, when Martin painted this, railways were the newest, most modern technology, the symbol of progress in industry, and Martin put them in hell. This is Victorian anxiety about modernity painted onto canvas. Is progress good, or are we speeding toward our own destruction? In November 1853, John Martin had a stroke. He was 64 years old. He'd been working on the triptych for over 2 years. The paintings were finished, or finished enough. Martin had signed them, he'd agreed to the tour. On February 10, 1854, the 3 paintings were exhibited together for the first time in Newcastle upon Tyne at the Victory Rooms in Grey Street. 7 days later, on February 17, 1854, John Martin died. He never got to see the reaction. He never knew what would happen next, because what happened next was extraordinary. The paintings went on tour across Britain, Glasgow, Edinburgh, York, Hull, Leeds, Oxford, Birmingham, Liverpool, Sheffield, and so on. They were displayed in exhibition halls, accompanied by explanatory pamphlets, just like Martin had done with his earlier biblical paintings, sometimes with theatrical lighting. A proto-son et lumière show. The Morning Post reviewed them in May 1855. The simple grandeur of the conception, the broad artistic arrangement, and the wonderfully inventive faculty and detail will serve to place the fame of Martin in a much higher position than any of his former labors. In 1856, they went to Dublin, then to New York in 1856 to 1857. The mezzotint engravings were finally published in 1857, 3 years after Martin's death. The tour continued. London in 1860, provincial cities throughout the 1860s, the last recorded exhibition in Britain was in Hexham in 1872. And then they went to Australia, Melbourne, Sydney. It has been estimated that up to 8 million people saw these paintings during their tours. That's quite a lot. And then they vanished. By the 1890s, John Martin's style had fallen out of fashion. His apocalyptic spectacles were dismissed as Victorian kitsch, too theatrical, too religious, or too popular. The paintings were displayed in a dingy room at Alexandra Palace. then on a staircase at the Doré Gallery from around 1900 to the 1920s. By 1923, they'd been taken out of their frames, rolled up, and stored in a warehouse. However, in 1935, they were sold at auction by Rex Nankivel, manager of the Redfern Gallery. The price? £7. That's about $350 in today's money. For 3 massive paintings that 8 million people had paid money to see. After the sale, The Last Judgment, the center panel, was cut into 4 strips to make a decorative screen. In 1945, the Tate Gallery bought The Great Day of His Wrath from Kivo. Critical opinion of Martin's work was starting to shift. What had seemed like Victorian excess now looked like proto-cinematic vision. His apocalyptic landscapes influenced science fiction, fantasy art, and disaster films. In 1947, a man named Robert Frank bought The Last Judgment, the one that had been cut into strips, and had it restored. Frank also bought The Plains of Heaven. When he died in 1953, his wife Charlotte inherited them. In 1974, 20 years after Frank's death, Charlotte donated both paintings to the Tate Gallery in memory of her husband. For the first time in 79 years, the triptych was reunited. From 2011 to 2012, the Tate Britain held the first major John Martin exhibition. The Last Judgment triptych was the centerpiece. They even recreated the Victorian exhibition style with theatrical lighting and a son et lumière show. So here's my question. What makes art valuable? Is it critical acclaim? Public popularity? The number of people who see it? Or the price at auction? John Martin's Apocalypse paintings were seen by 8 million people. They were dismissed by critics and sold for £7, cut into strips, and yet now they hang in one of the world's greatest museums. Went from greatness to worthless, back to masterpiece status. But were they always masterpieces? Or did we just change our minds about what matters?